Welcome to Automates, the podcast that brings you musings from thought leaders and industry pioneers who are shaping the way we work, think, and succeed. Each episode is packed with insights, expert interviews, and practical tips that will inspire and empower you to take your business to the next level. So tune in, subscribe, and get ready to innovate with Automates. Well, hello, Nicole. How are you?
Fine, Ben. How are you?
Good. I'm glad we're starting off with you laughing at me, because that's not unusual in any way, shape, or form. So it's fine. And
You
I know.
are the world's greatest podcaster so far. So
Thanks.
congrats.
That's sarcasm. So that's two things we've ticked off before we've even done intros. Glorious. Right. So, Nicole, for those people in the industry that have no idea who you are, and that might be listening to this podcast, which there probably aren't that many, why don't you let us know who you are and what you do?
First question, if they don't know who I am, are they even in the industry, Ben?
Well, that is I don't know. Let's try. Let's see what happens.
All right. My name is Nicole Bradick. I'm the CEO of a company called Theory and Principle. We are a design and development studio. So we work with law firms, legal tech companies, nonprofits, you name it, to design and develop legal technology products.
Ah, cool.
So, yeah.
Very nice. And so within that sort of world of design and everything else, how did you get started, and when did you get started, and how did you find your niche?
So I've been working in the legal tech and innovation space for about 15 years. Theory and Principle is my third company in the space. I started as an attorney, and I've been building software products for about 10 of those years. And it's been sort of a weird evolution of sort of randomness that got me in this field. My first company was not a tech company. It was like high-end labor arbitrage. And then my second company, we were doing like innovation consulting. And at that company is where we got our first software development project. And that's kind of where I fell in love with product work, and then haven't looked back from there.
Oh, cool. Awesome. And so in that sense, you sort of, I don't know, maybe a little bit like me, but in my head, I think like this, because I don't like doing the same thing day in, day out. I like having a broad set of roles, responsibilities, ideas, projects, and everything else. But I suppose from your perspective, instead of going off and building a product and running that product and living that product, you get the opportunity to work with a whole bunch of different people, different stages of sort of experience, trying to do different things. I think that must be really cool to get to choose who you work with and the opportunities that come off the back of that.
Yeah, it's nice. We typically have 15-ish active projects at a time. And there's usually like a huge divergence of subject matter, types of clients. Like right now we have a product in like the med mal space. And we also have a product in like conservatorships. So like completely all over the place, with very different interests, very different goals, very different types of technologies. So yeah, we definitely, I think our whole team likes that type of variety. I think that the challenge is that, if you're working in SaaS space, you get to like continuously improve over time, and you get to sort of like really nail like the tiniest, like, the onboarding flow or something like that. We don't get that luxury typically. But it, it's sort of there's a balance there that's nice though.
Yeah. No, I think that's sort of, people come to you because you're now sort of seen to be experts in the field. I think sort of when I first met you, which was, I think, a legal geek in London, met you in person, that is. I knew of you, obviously, because if you're not in the industry and you don't know Nicole Bradick, then what are you doing? But I met you, and it was like, you guys I think this was 6 years ago. I can't remember. But it was sort of, you could tell that it wasn't just what you were saying. It was sort of your background, the experience, what you were working on. It was that sort of cutting edge of, okay, well, you can't just build shit products. You've got to build products that mean something, that people can sort of empathize with, that can like you gets under your skin, and not necessarily in a way that, oh, you love using and it's like, because they're all functional, but it's ultimately you're tapping into something that is more than just lines of code. And that sort of, that's lost on many, I think. Lots of different products and sort of solutions, and then, well, historically has been lost on many. And I think there's it's got a lot better. But how do you see the world of legal tech changing, other than the fact that you've led that change and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
What do you see as the step forward that people have made? Because I look back and go, well, as soon as people needed to be able to do stuff on their mobile phones, that changed the way people think about how they design software. That wasn't
Mhm.
the only reason why sort of people's change sort of, but what do you think that sort of triggered the change and the focus on UX in the legal tech world?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was 100% competition, and I think like that time, like the 5-6 year ago mark, was like probably like the big turning point as far as like saturation in the market hitting like a fever pitch, and like and sort of the big differentiators started to become like people used to compete on features and functionality, and then once they like you achieved parity in features and functionality, then it was like, okay, well, what do we compete on now? Pricing? Okay, well, we can compete on pricing, but then what do we compete on now? Well, how about usability?
Mm.
That's a real way we can compete and we can stand out. And it used to be like when I started this company. So this particular company is 6 years old. So when we started, we would do work for firms, and like they had no language around user experience. They had no real knowledge or anything around that. So we would build products for law firms. Like they knew they would need an app, but they had no like they couldn't like really describe what they want or describe things. So we would do things for them, like the dumbest little like tweaks if we're working on a design. Like I remember in our first year of this company, we were working on a page, and there was a page that had too much content. So we put it under an accordion menu, just, like the carrot that you click and then it expands and opens, like very common, not like a groundbreaking UX decision. And a client said, wow, you guys really are good at user experience design. Like her mind was blown that we put content under an accordion menu. Right. So like expectations were super low. Like that is not a knock on my designers. Like our designers were like hitting it, like we were doing great work. But like our challenge was not very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Like those expectations have dramatically increased, I think, because as competition has increased, and I think as more like digital natives have come into the workforce in legal and are sort of more used to consumer products, the sort of expectations have risen, and people are more searching and as they're buying products and building products. So that's good news for everyone,
Yeah.
but also very good news for us, because now we have clients who come in and have opinions, and they have the right language around things, and they know what to ask for, they know what they're looking for, and so I think that that is also like the piece of pie of clients of ours who are legal tech companies has grown dramatically. Like when we first started, it was maybe like 5% of our work came from legal tech companies. It's now 30%,
Oh wow.
35%
Okay.
legal tech companies, because they're all realizing that like, okay, well, in order to stay competitive, we really need to have a design focus. Like we can't just add feature upon feature and create these like zombie monster products that just are feature heavy and be responsive to sales, when sales is like, okay, in order to nail you know this X firm, we need to add this feature, let's just go do it.
Yeah.
Like there's backing up a little and saying, okay, how are we going to actually approach this from a product level and design from a design standpoint?
So when you're working with vendors, you're not just sort of doing sort of the buttons and the design, but you're giving them a strategic framework to operate in. So to your point, the language that they should be talking, the language that makes them more, I'm going to say this in the perhaps the wrong word, but more meaningful customer, because they can challenge you and push you and sort of come with an opinion, as opposed to make it look pretty, make it look usable type thing. Which leads me to the point. So I saw, I think it was last week, you were promoting a new-ish UX 101 course on LinkedIn. So I don't know if that's a new sort of service line to the theory and principle world, or is that something that you've always done? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we have run a number of UX 101 workshops for law firms, particularly,
Okay.
mostly innovation teams, data teams, knowledge teams, that kind of thing. And it's been for organizations who just want their team to have like the language around design. So maybe it's the teams that are involved with buying, or it's the teams that are involved with like overseeing the build of solutions. So they aren't the people who are going to be designing software. But they want them to know what to look for and sort of how to identify design problems, and have some of the language around like how to know what's good design, how to know what's bad design. Um,
Okay.
and so it's really intended as like a very baseline level of understanding and knowledge. Um, so we've been running those workshops for firms, and so we figured like, why don't we bring that knowledge out sort of more broadly to the industry? So we put together an online course where we share some of the things that we have, like you know, there's content, but then there's also like we have a worksheet that's like a checklist to like, if you're building or buying, it's a checklist of like considerations as you go through it. There's a research guide for like how to think about what type of research to be doing depending on what you're trying to learn and what type of sort of project it is. And so that's now available. You can go through our site to the resources section and find that, a link to that. So, our when we do the workshops, it's pricey, right? Of course, because it's sort of a half day type thing. So this was intended to be like a really quick hit, less expensive, like a 1 hour thing if you want to get like that really high level knowledge.
And I suppose that sort of stuff it's universal. It's not. Whilst you were saying that sort of the in-person courses that you've done in the past have been sort of almost law firm specific, but designed around sort of needs of innovation teams, people that weren't building but were contributing to the build and design and implementation of technology. But I guess that these sorts of things, having it on an online course, it's accessible to everyone and anyone in the field. It's sort of, there is no sort of thing, and I think that's. I've often looked at sort of ideas from my background. So when I was heading up customer success at TR, and then when I left, IQ/TR, and when I left, I was thinking maybe there's an opportunity to sort of not do a proper job, but actually just put my knowledge out there. It was a very short course, obviously, but what does that look like? But I think that's the beauty of digital these days. You can sort of create content and put it out there and make it accessible to everyone.
Yeah, and we're a pretty unique organization in that we span the entire industry.
Yeah,
So we're solving problems for nonprofits. We're solving problems for some of the largest legal organizations in the world. And so we have a pretty interesting, and our designers particularly have a pretty interesting uh, knowledge base and sort of outlook on how to design for the legal industry. So I think that definitely all comes together in courses like this, where we try to make it relevant no matter who you are, because in the end we're either designing for lawyers, for consumers of legal information, so clients of all kinds,
yeah,
or for people who are like law adjacent, right? So helpers, staff, assistants, you name it. So like no matter what segment of the industry you're in, we're kind of designing for the same type of people. And I think that is what we try to hit on as you go through the course.
That makes sense. And talk to me about. So I'm intrigued about. So you were talking about the sort of different types of roles that you've got within Theory and Principle. Talk to me about the makeup of the team in terms of. I often look at sort of consultancies and they've got banks and banks of really sort of people just churning out work. It feels like you've got a smaller collection of experts and sort of industry sort of as you said adjacent, so maybe not legal experts but actually understanding of the combinations of all the different things. So how have you brought the team together, and what do you look for in terms of the team?
Yeah, so we're definitely a boutique. I've kept us intentionally small. I like small teams. Um, and some of the people on my team have been with me for nearly a decade, so they know more about legal tech than a lot of people out there. But I'm the only lawyer on the team. I look for people who are experts in their respective fields, and then I teach them law. I've tried to go the opposite path of like finding people who know legal and then teaching them sort of the domain, and that has been less successful. So our team is made up of engineers and designers and product managers um, and researchers, and so yeah, and then they learn law. They learn sort of the legal specific work as they stay here. So we do like a law specific boot camp when they first come on, and then we do like ongoing legal education as they stay.
Oh, sweet.
That's how we've approached it.
Cool. I mean, I think that's the thing. I saw any. I mean, I'm responsible for a small team of professionals who have got various backgrounds, and it's sort of one of the things that you try and dig through is you can't always hire people with a legal background into specific things, either because they're too expensive or because they're whatever. So that sort of legal boot camp on sort of the first day or the first week, just getting them acclimatized to the world that we've lived in for I don't know how long. I can't remember last. I think I joined law firm in 2000. 2000. It's been a long time anyway, and I wasn't a lawyer. I'm not clever enough or smart enough. Um, Moving on, so I last saw you in person in London at Legal Tech Talk. In fact, I saw you on the Wednesday, and you were running a workshop that was sponsored by Shilpa and her team from Linklaters. And I got to sit front row seat. I didn't heckle or cause any trouble. I don't think I
Truly, really impressive feat. I will say your maturity was superlative.
see. I can be mature sometimes. Why don't you talk to us about that workshop? Because I think we've gone, I don't know, 20 odd minutes and not mentioned Gen AI yet. So we've done well. We've done well. So why don't you tell us about that workshop? I found it fascinating in terms of how things have changed, even in such a short period of time. So why don't you give us a quick synopsis, and then we can see where we get to.
Yeah, sure. So we over the last like 18 months, obviously we have been doing a lot of work in Gen AI because our clients have been doing a lot of work in Gen AI. And it has sort of fundamentally shifted or caused like a different thinking in the user experience, user interface design discipline. And so we thought we would bring some of that learning to the legal industry. And when we spoke with the Legal Tech Talk guys, they offered us some space to run a workshop. And the folks at Linklaters wanted to jump right in and co-host that with us, which was awesome. So we did a half-day workshop that I think was really successful. People were really interested and really engaged. And we had like general counsel of some of the banks there, and people are like, I was shocked at how many people showed up for such like a practical course. on Gen AI, but clearly it's something that everyone wants to know about at
Yeah.
this stage. So I think, what has happened is at the outset, everyone sort of defaulted to creating chatbots because that was the natural thing to do. And we did it too, right? The very first project that came in, we were like, okay, cool, chatbot. I like to think that we're a bit more searching in our understanding of user experience and user interface design, but like it's a language-based solution, right? It's a language, we're solving language problems, and everyone understood and had used ChatGPT at that moment. So really like the default assumption was chatbot, and everyone was also trying to get super quick to market. That was really important at first. So chatbots are UIs that are really, really fast to build, to design, to implement. So I think like everyone else, the whole industry was launching chatbots.
No, that's not true. That's not true. We didn't launch a chatbot.
Oh, come
No,
on.
not us.
What'd you do?
What did we do? We didn't launch chatbot. In fact, we took a step back and didn't do anything because we felt that everything was going to be changing so quickly. We're a small organization, so in order to pivot rapidly into something that we felt might be transient in sort of design ethics and principles and all that sort of stuff, and fundamentally change how things should or shouldn't work in our product. We just didn't have the time or the appetite to do it because we felt so strongly that actually, and it's one of the rare times that I've sort of not been right, but everything has evolved so quickly. If we could only do one thing, the chatbot interface was not what we should have done.
What a
So
smart boy you are, Ben.
I know. One thing a year, one good idea a year. That's all I get. And that was my good idea last year.
Amazing.
I know. But that covers the point that you were talking about in your workshop, which is everything has evolved and everything has changed in 18 months or less. And it's crazy that how you start to think about the trust aspect of sort of these tools and what it means and the use cases and how you should integrate the capability or be the capability or deliver whatever it might be. And I think that's all of those questions come sort of front running during that workshop. It was really interesting how you brought everything together. You talked about sort of the evolution of chatbots through to the final state, which was, and I can't remember the language that you used because I was paying attention but have a bad memory. But that's the kind of journey that we're on as an organization. Sort of, you could have done this, but actually no, we're just going to front run and start here and then see what happens. What was that state? What was that end point? I can't remember.
So we've sort of mapped the sort of the universe of UIs on this sort of continuum of how constrained versus how flexible it is.
Yep.
And Chat UI, while it's super flexible, is also like the most difficult from a user's perspective, right? It's requires like a lot of cognitive load where they have to craft this prompt and they have to think about a lot of things as they're crafting the prompt. Right. The sort of most constrained UI is what we understand today. It's like the point and click, the sort of graphic user interface that we all use every day.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the most constrained, but also the easiest for the user because it's, I point, I click this thing, I expect it to do a certain thing, and it's going to go ahead and do that. So I think, the more you can have a constrained UI, usually the better it is for your user. But in order to have a constrained UI, you really need to understand what the user is going to do when they get there. So you have to know the user's goals when they get there, which for a product like ChatGPT, you have no idea what the user is going to do, right? Like the whole point of ChatGPT is you can come here and do whatever you want. In legal, we're always going to know more than that, right? We're going to know the user's going to come here. They're going to want to query ask questions about this contract, or the user is going to come here, they're going to want a summary of a deposition. The user is going to come to this application, they're going to want to whatever, something about the, legal research. We're always going to know more, otherwise, like, it's not a product, right? If you don't know what they're going to do, then you don't even have a product, you have no thesis, right? We should be having like more constrained types of UIs, which could be like, it's a chat and then it leads you into a more constrained UI once you know what the user's doing. So it like greets you in with a chat, and then once we understand, then it's a point and click. Or it greets you in with a point and click, and then you might be able to like have a chat if you're lost or something like that. So there is this like range of UI options, and so my whole point of that is that we need to be thinking about a bit more critically about how we craft the UI based on how much we know about what the user is going to do, but then also how good is the user at crafting prompts? Like, how expert are they? And I would say in legal, we should always expect that they're not going to be experts. They're usually going to be more novice. And I think we need to like account for that and not try to like train the hell out of lawyers, because they're just not going to ever get to the point of being able to write good prompts. So anything that we can programmatically feed to the AI, like, we should just be doing that programmatically instead of relying on the user to write that into their prompt.
Yeah. And I think that's the evolution of and then understanding sort of end users and how what their objectives might be and everything else. That's tricky, but it's tricky when everything is changing so rapidly and everything is evolving so rapidly, and you sort of see all of the new capabilities and ideas and thoughts and processes that come in. I mean, one of the things that you talked about it at the workshop, but is something that we're sort of looking at, which is, I suspect that for certain use cases and certain scenarios, there might not be a need for a UI or a UX, because you know what needs to happen at a certain point in the process. So you should use the generative AI tool of whatever language model and doing whatever to go off and do that part of the process and serve up the output, the outcome at the end, without actually taking somebody to an interface, because something's happened over here. So something could be programmed to happen here, and you don't really need to know why or what. But I think there's the part that you sort of described in the workshop is that sense of trust, understanding what the application's doing for you and why, and who's programmed it and what does it mean, and all of those things. So how do you see? Do you think that my weird reality of actually baking this stuff into wider processes where there isn't a chat interface, or there isn't a point and click, or there isn't a thing, because actually it's so well defined and the capability is understood, and you're just marrying those inputs and outputs together? Do you see that being a sort of a thing? I don't know.
I think if the user has the ability to see and edit the steps the system will take, if they want to, then yeah. But if they can't, if it's just like a black box of what the system's going to do, then I think that trust element is just not going to be there ever. Like, I don't know if we'll ever trust the system to just do things and we have no part in it because we have no UI.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
you need.
I don't mean no UI ever, but I no UI to sort of at the point. One of the scenarios you said, okay, I need to go and do some research, so I'm going to go to my product that's going to give me my research, or I need to generate a document, or I need to summarize something, or I need to do something. I think my point is that if you can bake that into an end-to-end process, you might not necessarily need 3 or 4 different UIs to achieve that. You ultimately know what the Gen AI model product thing is doing, but you might not need to interact with it. It might just do what it does.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think it's like a lot of things in UX, which is like, I think the user needs to know that they can access the steps that it's taking and that that's available, but they don't need to actually engage with it. Like, it doesn't need to be front and center. They don't need, but like, they need to be able to go in and access and edit those steps if they want to.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense.
But then, yeah, I don't disagree.
Cool. And so when the with the pace of Gen AI and with the workshop that you did and the information that you shared, do you see how it? I just oftentimes I take a step back and I see noise. It's quite mean, but I just see there's so much noise, and a lot of it is really well articulated content and information. Some of it's product, some of it just I think for a sort of a buyer of technology or a user of technology, it's never really been harder, to be honest with you, in terms of understanding sort of what to use at what point, because the range of choice is ridiculous. There's like, I don't know, 350 recognized large language models that all do something slightly different. And it's like, I think that's just conflating my noise theory, that there's just so much and it's just really difficult to work out where to go, particularly not comparing law firm to us here at Autologics, but if we're small and we can't pivot to just release something because everyone's releasing something, but you've got law firms trying to work out what the right strategy is. Do we build? Do we buy? Do we do this? Do we do that? What use cases? It feels like everyone's rushing, and there is an opportunity to take a step back and pause and not wait, but sort of understand a bit more and sort of see. How do you see the industry with that kind of perspective? Not that I think noise, everyone's going to progress in it, and noise is important because it's conversation, it's dialogue, it's open, it's all very positive, but it's all consuming at the moment. How do you sort of see the industry changing or evolving?
I think that there was more noise last year where everybody was scrambling just to understand and to play. And this year, I think people have gotten a lot more pragmatic, honestly. Like,
Okay.
I think it's a lot more like, what are our actual use cases? Like, we have an engagement right now with a firm, two engagements actually with two different firms, where they've gotten pilots of some Gen AI software, and we're going in and doing like user research of like, hey, lawyers, how are you actually using this? Is it actually solving problems for you? What are the problems it's solving? And if so, like how can we help you? Like, we're running workshops of like, let's try to imagine what it could actually do for you. And so how do we build that backlog of solutions that you can actually build with these like tools that you're using? So I think they're actually like doing really smart, pragmatic things now.
Yeah.
And like, I would say, like, so from a business perspective, our Q4 last year was really quiet. And I think it was quiet because everyone was just trying to figure out like what the hell was going on. Our January Q1 was gangbusters, and it wasn't just full of Gen AI solutions. I think it's people were getting back to like the actual solutions that they needed and that were like the real things that solved real problems. So I think like hype wise, like, you know, people talk about the hype cycle here. Like, I don't see it because I think like at least the firms we talk to, like, they're doing smart, pragmatic things now, and they're approaching it in smart ways and trying to like be realistic about what's going to actually impact the organization. So I'm seeing things that I don't hate, and that's, you know, that's rare for me.
But I think, I think the hype cycle or whatever we call it. But I think there's always the front runners in these things where people sort of they race to the front. They recognize that there's something going on. They build up their knowledge, and they're the early adopters. They're the fast failers. They're the ones that are coming out on the other side and going, all right, I now know what these crazy use cases that we thought about we could spend this money on. We're just not going to do that. We're going to do this perhaps even more simpler stuff, or these more broad ranging stuff. I think that's
Yeah.
just a reflection of time and as you say, understanding. I just
And to be fair, like our client base tends to be pretty self-selecting,
yeah.
Like we tend to have clients who are more thoughtful about things than
Yeah, but I think that's a reflection of sort of your background. Your background is thinking about the UX of not just implementing technology for technology's sake. It's UX. It's how are you going to achieve the goals with this particular tech that we might be building or designing or helping you implement? What does it mean, and how does that sort of get situated? So naturally, your clients are going to be at the easier end of that curve, perhaps, which is a nice place to be. How do I get some of those? That'd be good. Not I'm saying my clients aren't there. You know what I mean? I didn't mean it like that. How do I get more of those? That's what I meant. So, what do you see? What do you see after the whole Gen AI stuff? I know you said that your Q1 was gangbusters, and not just with Gen AI. So people getting back to the not the basics, but sort of the BAU stuff, the stuff that got put on hold towards the end of the last year. How do you see things evolving for the rest of this year and into 2025?
I mean, our work has not slowed down. It's been the busiest year we've ever had by a lot. And I mean, we're working on some really cool Gen AI products, some really neat new SaaS solutions. It's interesting. I mean, I was saying this to somebody the other day, like 9 months ago as a team, we sat down and we had a retreat, and it was like, okay, do we need to be worried about the impacts that Gen AI might have on our business and what we do? And so, we tried to play out a bunch of scenarios. Like, this is not the scenario that we were thinking. Like, we did not see this being like this big of a boon to our business, to be honest. Like,
No.
it really, like, there's so much opportunity this is created for our clients, and that's turned into opportunity for us. So, I don't see that changing in the next year, 3 years, 5 years.
No.
So
awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing with it. It sort of, isn't it? It's sort of when you're at the right end of the conversation, it's sort of, and the nature of you and what you do and how you've done it at Theory and Principle, you're naturally going to be part of sort of the next round of conversations, the next round of ideas, the next round of things that go through stuff. So that's a reflection of you and your team, I think, in terms of how you see stuff going, which is nice, which is very nice. One last thing. So on this silly little podcast that I do, I always ask people when I'm going to see them next in person, typically some kind of legal industry event. I'm assuming that is ILTA, because we're sort of only a few weeks away. So you'll be at ILTA.
yes, sir.
People will be able to find you and ask you all sorts of UX questions about accordions and hamburgers and all sorts of other stuff.
We can both eat and talk about hamburgers.
And play accordions.
Play and talk about accordions. Yes.
Exactly. Perfect. Nicole, thank you very much. You are a delight to chat to. And I think what you guys are doing at Theory and Principle is awesome. I think the industry needs sort of wonderfully boutique, independent little consultancies like yours to sort of keep everyone sane and on the level, because otherwise we'd all be self-consuming crazy people, and I think that would be bad. That would be bad.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
No worries. Cool. All right. Well, I will catch you in a couple of weeks in Nashville, and keep safe, and I will see you soon.